Hello everyone and welcome to another scrapbook layout process video. Today I'm using the Hey Handsome bulk papers. So this is the two sides that you get when you get the bulk paper, which is also in the card making workshop kit. And I'm also using the mix-in paper. One side of it has the text on it and it's got some floral elements on it, but I'm using the side that has the texture on it today because I think it works really well with Hey Handsome. And as you can see, I'm using quite a few Cricut cuts from the Hey Handsome digital collection. There are a whole lot of tools on here which I think add a really cool and fun element to a tool time type layout. I have gone ahead and I've cut all of these out and I've sized them so that they fit with my layout, and I can design all of that in Design Space. And this element here, this hexagon, that has also been cut on the Cricut, and I've used the draw function so that I can have this line all the way around the inside of each of the hexagons. So I'm just going to move my Versamat over because I want to add some texture to these tools. I have gone ahead and I've done a couple because I wanted to have a little play before I did this on video, but you can see if I put the hammer right next to it, it's perfectly fine just to assemble the elements like this. I've used the dark side of Papaya, and that makes a really cool little hammer to put on the page. But I wanted to add some depth to these and a little bit more character so they weren't quite as flat. I've got a large saw here that I've done. I have another one for the page, and I've got a set of pliers. I really love how this Hey Handsome digital art collection pretty much comes with an entire toolbox for you to play with. I've got a screwdriver here, and all of these elements I am going to give a bit of an ink treatment to, and they aren't too hard to put together. I'll just lay out the screwdriver. You can see there are 4 little elements here. So the handle goes on top, and then there is this part to help enhance the handle, and then there is the top of the screwdriver as well. With the pliers, you get a base layer, you get a layer to put over this section here, and then one to go on the other side. And there's also a paintbrush. So this comes with quite a few layers to it because you've got the brush base, and then it gives you a base for the paintbrush, a piece to put over top, a piece to put over the top of this, and a little band here. So when it all comes together, it looks really, really good. And I've also got a title I've created in Design Space using the offset feature, and I picked this font because I thought it would work really well with this masculine or tool type page. And I'm also going to ink around the edges of the hexagons. I've got several here that I've already inked up, but I am going to just ink this one up. I left this one so that you could see me do that on camera. And for all the ink blending, I'm using Espresso, Mink, Papaya, and charcoal. I'll just move these up just a fraction. And how I inked these, just to give a nice sharp line on it, was to run the edges of the paper through the ink pad. This is the quickest way of distressing the edges, or just adding some ink to the edges of the cardstock so that it stands out when you put it up against, say, a white background. And it gives a nice sharp line. As long as you don't drag the paper on an angle like this, if you keep it fairly upright, you'll get a nice sharp line. And I'm going to do the same thing for these photo mats here. So it's just a quick swipe through. And then you get a little bit of a textured edge on this. I do recommend, if you're going to do something like this, to do it off the page. Don't do it over the top of the page in case you get some of the ink coming out and splattering your work. I'm also going to add that same distressing to these tags that I've got here. So let's get into the fun stuff of adding some shading to these elements. I do have these blending brushes which have a smaller edge to them, and I just got these on Amazon. You can use your other tools and everything when you go to blend with this. You just have to make sure that you use the edge of the brush so not too much comes through onto the actual area. I want to leave light and shade for these. So you can see, if I hold this up to the camera, it's a bit hard because it's not actually adhered together yet, but I've inked through on the edges, on the inside edges of these pliers. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the inside edges where they cross over. So this one here crosses over, so I need to ink up that edge here. And using an all-purpose mat, I can just come off the edge And you can see that the ink is going onto the all-purpose mat, which I can wipe off. But because I'm using a very light hand, I can also get the inside edge of this element. I think you can see that there. And I've got ink on my fingers already, and I've only just started. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing to the inside edge of this set of pliers, or this handle part. And that's just going to add a little bit of depth to this. And while I've got the charcoal ink out and I've got the charcoal onto my mat here, I'm going to treat this hammer as well. So I only need to wipe up in between each colour that I've used. For the tools, I've used charcoal, linen, papaya and espresso. And you'll notice when I went through the inks before, I'm going to use Mink ink because the linen ink doesn't quite give enough depth, or what I was looking for. So I'm coming in on the edges and then a little bit down the middle. And it all depends how heavy-handed you are. And you can see by using a smaller tip with a brush, it does give you a little bit more control, but it is perfectly achievable to do this with a normal blending brush. Or you could use sponge daubers. If you have sponge daubers, that gives you quite a bit more control and it will give you a finer look than using the bigger head brushes. And I've got a bit of ink on that part there, but that's okay because I'm going to cover that up. And I'm going a bit darker on this piece here because you can see there's an element that goes on top, so I want to create a little bit of shadow. And then I'm just going to swipe in a little bit more just to give more texture. I'm dabbing off with the brush every now and then. And you can see already that's built up a little bit of dimension on the hammer, and I really love how that looks and what that gives to the element. So now I'm going to bring in the papaya ink and I'm going to do all the papaya elements, but first I just need to clean this section off. So I've just got a wet wipe and my paper towel, and then I can move into the next bit, and it's exactly the same process for all of these. So I'm going to do a couple of these on camera for you, and then I'll do the rest off camera because you get the idea of what I'm doing just from this little demonstration here. You don't need to see me ink up all of them. If you get a bit heavy-handed like I have here, I wouldn't worry about that too much because when you think about how much tools are actually handled, they do build up a bit of texture and a bit of grunge around the handles and all the elements, and I think that just adds a bit of fun and playfulness to the elements. So you can see I'm going off the edge here and then bringing my brush in, and then a little bit more colour down around the base, and that gives a great look to the handle there. I'm going to do the same thing on the saw handle. Just going to move this up with its other elements so they stay together so I don't lose track of what is what. And I'm using, again, the dark side of papaya, and I'm going around the outside edges, but I'll also go in from the centre where this element here is, where the handle piece is. So I'm going to bring some ink out from the edge. This treatment, it does not take too long to do. You don't have to worry if it's all perfectly blended. I've cut them onto coloured cardstock, so that does some of the blending for you because I don't have to make sure it's an actually smooth transition between where I've come in from the edge and then onto the handle. And where I think I need to build up some more, I can just bring in some more ink. But I'm not going for perfect blending with this. I do want to have some texture on the handles and everything of these tools. Now for the paintbrush, this has cut out where the bristles are, and rather than it being just a flat piece of paper, I'm going to bring in some of the papaya ink along the top edges of the bristles, and then I'm just going to do some swishing down with my ink to give a little bit more colour. I really think this is giving a nice touch to the bristles on this paintbrush, and you can see when I put that on there you'll get the feeling that this has been dipped into an actual paint tin. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do the inking on the rest of these pieces, just like I've shown you with the pieces I've done so far. And then I'll be back to assemble the page. Before I start putting the page together, I just thought I'd show you the completed tools with all the shading and everything on them. You can see that it does bring them to life a little bit more just by adding a little bit more texture to them. And you can do that quite quickly with the blending brushes or with the sponge daubers, as I mentioned. Now, with these pliers, I decided that they needed a little silver element on the middle here. So I'm going to use the metallic paint markers, the 3mm. I'm using the quicksilver one. You do need to shake these before you use them. And I've just put my dots over the top, and I've decided that the smallest one is going to work the best for this. I don't want it to be too big, and I've just run that over top, and I'm going to set that aside to dry, and it will be dry by the time I finish putting my page together. What you could also do is use the 0.7mm pen, and I'm just going to add some little accents around the edges of these pieces. And I just find that when I use Cricut cuts, I do like to try and enhance them, or SVG cuts. These are SVGs, so if you have a Brother or a Silhouette machine, you are able to use anything that uses an SVG file. So Brother, Silhouette, it doesn't really matter. As long as the cutting machine uses a Silhouette file, you'll be able to cut things out with our digital collections now. But I just think that by adding little bits of shading and a little bit of pen work to Cricut cuts or SVG cuts, it just makes things highlight and come to life just that little bit more. It's just not a flat piece of cardstock. I'm not worrying too much about where I put things. While I'm talking to you, I'm just adding little bits of this. I thought I would show this on camera in case you wanted to get some ideas of what you might like to do when using this sort of a Cricut cut or an SVG cut. And I think that's all that's needed for now. I can always go back in and add some more if I think I need them. But these metallic paint markers are the best markers that I've used. I really love how the paint just flows through it. So I'm going to put all of these into my little tray, and then I'm going to dry fit my page so you can see where the layout is going. So now I'm going to lay out all my hexagons. I did take a photo of how I liked it when I was doing the original thought process of how all of this would come together. I was going to open this up in Design Space for you and show you on my iPad, but my iPad is getting a bit old and it's not cooperating with me, so I'm having troubles getting that to actually show. It keeps shutting down every time I go and open it. So I'm just referring to a little bit of a photo that I took beforehand to try and put all these pieces back after fiddling with them for quite some time. I just want to lay these out how I had it. Sometimes I do go through a bit of a thought process when I'm using pieces of pattern paper like this, because I want to make sure that it's pleasing to the eye when everything is spread across the page. But what you could do is definitely a double mat on this, so that you have a little white border and then maybe a charcoal or a harbour mat. That would work quite well. And then I'm going to bring in all my little elements that I've got already cut out and distressed on the edges. I think 2 tags will work quite well here, and they're going to provide little journal spots. And I'm going to lay out my title first. So I'm just doing a complete dry fit with everything until I'm really happy with how things look, and then I'm going to take a photo of everything as it's placed so that I can go back and adhere everything down. And then I get to play with all of these elements to work out where I want to put them. So I think the biggest saw will go on this side. I've got another saw, so I'm going to put that over this side. The hammers are exactly the same size. So I have repeated a couple of elements, but I'm thinking I might have to move my photos just a little bit. I know that when I take photos, sometimes I step back a bit, but things down at the bottom areas, it's sort of fun to have elements come over top of them part way and bring them in with the layout. Paintbrush here, I think, and the spanner. I've got my pliers, and then I've got my screwdriver. So I'm just having a little look on how I want all of this placed. And I've taken a photo on my iPad so I can refer to it. I'm recording with my phone, so it's no use me taking a photo with my phone because I won't be able to see it. But I quite like the placement of this. But as I said, I can't get Cricut Design Space to open up on my iPad, so it might be time to upgrade. Normally when I'm designing things, I use my computer for that. I just like referring to things on my iPad. Now, to add some extra little elements to this, I'm deciding whether or not I want to bring in background elements for some controlled splatters, or if I'm going to do some splattering direct page with some ink. And I think that's what I'm going to do. I could also bring in this scrapbooking Hey Handsome stamp set and use this element to go around the corners, but I have used that on other layouts, so I'll link to that video in the description below. Make sure you check out the description below because that will have a link to everything that I've used today. So now that I have that all laid out, I'm actually going to take it apart so I can do some splattering. It is a bit of a process sometimes when you do a page layout. You know that you want to look at how it looks first and then decide if you want to add any other finishing touches. So I'm just going to bring in charcoal ink. I'm going to do a little bit of CPR on this, so I'm pressing the ink into the lid. And I think I've changed my mind. I think I'm going to use this Dylusions shimmer spray. You can see, and this is still in its packaging. I haven't actually used this before, but instead of using the spray nozzle, I think I'm going to do some controlled splatters with it. This is actually from some frozen mochi, so I saved the actual container because I thought it would make a really good paint palette. What I'm going to do is pour a little bit of this in here. Oop. That's probably a bit too much. And before I try it on my good piece of white daisy, I'm going to get out a little scrap piece. I've just put that underneath so I don't have to wipe down my all-purpose mat totally before I bring in my white daisy pieces. And I'm just going to get a paintbrush. I'm not going to water this down to start with. I want to see what it looks like when it's not watered down. And I think I like the strength of that. I'm going to lift a little bit out of here and put it in the other side and add a little bit of water to see what the difference is. I've just got my little spray bottle. I'm going to spray a little bit of water in there and mix that around a bit and tap off over here. There's not too much difference, so I'm going to add a bit more water. And by using this style of brush, I'm getting some really good round pieces to it. But I think what I like is the watered down piece. I'm getting some light and shade with that depending on how big the splatter is. So I'm going to go for that on my pages. And if I look at the photo that I took, I know that I want some down in this area here and also up in this top left corner. So I want some around here, and that's giving me some really nice large dots here and some down here as well. So there's going to be drying time involved for this. And now I'm going a little bit higher up rather than closer, and then I'm getting some more fine speckles coming. So this is very, very cool. I'm quite liking how this looks, and I think it's going to work quite well. I'm going to bring in another sheet of white daisy, and I'm going to try it with this one. Now, these pages won't go to waste. I just want to see the difference on a larger piece as to whether or not this comes out a lot stronger and which look I like better, whether it's the watered down bit or the full strength. I'm loving how this is splattering. I don't know why it took so long to open up that bottle. And I think I'm going to go with the full strength. I'll just bring this in so you can see a comparison. These ones, because it's watered down, the ink, when it's hit the paper with the watered down piece, it's sort of splayed out a little bit more, as it would because you have watered this down. So it gives a totally different look. This one here, because I haven't watered down the Dylusions ink spray, it's kept it as circles, and that's the look I'm going for my page. So now I'm going to do the right page. I'm just going to bring this photo in, and I'm going to put some down in this area here, and I will put a little bit on this left edge so it'll carry over from the splatters here. I'm going to put some up in this top right corner as well. So if you don't like doing splatters like this with a paintbrush, that you can't control, then I would recommend using background elements because you can control the splatter. But I quite like how this has come out, and I'm not going to waste that piece that I did before on my test. I'm going to bring that in and I'm going to cover this whole sheet so that I've got some backgrounds for some cards. Actually, I might save it for a scrapbooking piece because this is actually creating a really nice textured sort of pattern paper. So if you do have a bit of a practice like I just did then and what you've envisaged hasn't quite worked out, just keep going with it, add some more to it and put that aside to use for another project. So this really is quite cool. I really like the Dylusions spray. There is a bit of a shimmer to this, but I don't think it's picking up on camera. It's called Dylusions Shimmer Spray, Black Marble. CTMH carry 3 colours. I'm not sure of the availability of all of them at the moment, but if they're available, I will put the links below. I'm going to clean up, put my page layout together, then I'll be back with the end result. Everything's all nicely adhered down. I've got one more little dot that I want to put on. I did go ahead off camera and I used the 3mm pen and I inked up some of these little dots just to scatter around, and I realised I just wanted one more, so I've got a group of 3 over here. I'm just waiting for that to dry. They do take a little bit of time to dry, but I just love how these tools look with the little bit of ink application and the silver pen. If you use the finest one, the 0.7mm, you can add just little touches and it really brings the tools to life. The splatters worked out really, really well, although I have done a bit of damage to my desk. I should have got out my spray box. And I am so pleased with how this layout came out. Putting a little silver brad inside here for the pliers just finished that off perfectly rather than having the darker side of charcoal coming through. And I think I said earlier that I used Espresso cardstock, but it's actually Mocha, and I've inked it up with Espresso ink. I realised while I was inking this up that I told you the wrong colours. I can't wait to put photos onto this layout. Now these tags here I haven't adhered. I'm going to cut a slit in my page protector here and put all of the journaling onto these tags so that they can be pulled out. I just used some waxed cord on this and I got that from Kmart a long time ago. I don't know if they still have any product like that, but I didn't have any small solid black twine. I know I can recolor it with my Spectrum Noir marker, but I really quite like the waxed cord on this. It just adds a bit more of an industrial feel to the page. I can see that I'll be doing a lot more splatters and using this Dylusions shimmer spray a little bit more on my pages. I wish I'd opened that up earlier. If you're like me and this was still plastic wrapped from your order that you did way back in August last year when this was released in our core catalogue back then, unwrap it, have a play, create some backgrounds. I've got this gorgeous background ready to go for either a page layout or some cards, some masculine cards. It's going to work really well. So even if you just get out a full sheet of white daisy, have a little play with this, use the spray. I haven't used it in this video because I wanted to see how the splatters worked, but it's well worth just having a play on full sheets of white daisy. You can always cut these up and use them as borders or for full backgrounds or as card bases. Just have a play with the product as soon as you receive it rather than leaving it all plastic wrapped like I did. I hope you enjoyed how I put everything together today, adding the extra dimension with the shading and the touches with the silver pen. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, happy crafting, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.